Howdy, Aztecs. So, welcome to Chapter 15, the Special Senses. This video will be number 1, and I think there's 2 videos for the ear. So, this is just a cartoon of the parts of the ear. We'll just start with some broad strokes, and then we'll go into all the little parts of the ear and all their cool names. So here's your ear, and it runs the outer ear here to this junction. So you go inside, and that's the external ear, and then the middle ear goes from where the external ear stopped to the beginning of the middle ear, and then actually this should be moved over just a little bit. There we go. So this is all middle ear. And then here's the internal ear. It kind of looks like a snail. So the external or outer ear, the middle ear, including the tympanic cavity. So this is your tympanic membrane or your eardrum. And then the internal ear. So the external, middle, and inner ear, obviously, they're all involved with hearing, but parts of the internal ear, so specifically this part right here, is involved with equilibrium. The receptors for hearing and balance are located in the inner ear. So the receptors for balance are in this structure, and then the receptors for hearing are in this structure. So the part that you see is called the auricle or the pinna. So that's all of this. And then you guys know that you have an earlobe. So that's called the lobule. And then there's the auditory canal or the external acoustic meatus. So remember, like when we did skeletal systems, a meatus, so that's an opening. Acoustics, that you probably heard that when you hear, what are the acoustics like in that arena? And then external, obviously the external environment. So this is the external acoustic meatus. So the auricle and the external acoustic meatus, they both direct sound waves to this thing called the tympanic membrane or the eardrum. And then the walls of the external ear contain sebaceous glands that have sebum, and then ceruminous glands. And everybody knows that you have to clean your ears, or that the glandular material will build up. Okay, so we talked about this guy. Here's the tympanic membrane. It's the boundary between the external and middle ear, and it's made of connective tissue, and I told you on the last slide, it vibrates in response to sound waves contacting it, and it transfers sound energy to the bones of the middle ear, and these guys are all the bones of the middle ear. Okay, so let's check everything that we've looked at. So we've got the auricle of the external ear, the lobule. We talked about the external acoustic meatus, tympanic membrane, and now from the middle ear, so here's the middle ear, that actually can go into your pharynx is the pharyngotympanic tube or the auditory tube. And you guys know this, you can, if you're in an airplane and you want to try to equalize the pressure in your ear, you can plug your nose and build up pressure in your nasal cavity, and it will pop that tympanic membrane back to equalize the pressure. Okay, the middle ear is a small cavity, and it's lined with mucous membrane. So this is all the mucous membrane of the middle ear, and it's got air in it, and you can find it in the temporal bone. So can you see this piece right here? And these pieces, you probably know this is bone, since you've seen so many cartoons of cut bone. It contains 3 auditory ossicles, or bones, that vibrate in response to the tympanic membrane moving back and forth in response to sound waves. And those bones are the hammer, anvil, and stirrup, or in Latin, the malleus. It's the hammer, so I guess that looked like a hammer. And this looks like an anvil. And I guess if you know anything about old-timey blacksmiths shops, then you'd know what an anvil looks like. And then the stapes, or stirrup. This really does kind of look like a stirrup on a saddle. So, and then the stapes, it doesn't show it in this cartoon, but the stapes is covering up this structure called the oval window of the inner ear. And then that oval window can transmit the movement of the stapes into the chamber, the chambers of the inner ear. And then we talked about this, the auditory tube connects the middle ear to the nasopharynx. So that's just the part of your throat that is connected to the nose. This auditory tube will allow you to equalize pressure in the middle ear with external air pressure. And then because this auditory tube in babies and young kids has a certain angle, babies and young children are more likely to get an a middle ear infection. So the infectious material can move up the auditory tube and into the middle ear. Okay. So in this cartoon, it tells you that the oval window is deep to the stapes, or the stirrup, and that's what I showed you. So there's an oval window here connected to the stapes, and then there's another window called the round window. So that's another membrane that we'll talk about later, but the oval window and the round window are going to move back and forth in response to waves in the fluid in the inner ear. So then this shows the position of the middle ear, and then here's a larger cartoon. So remember, all this material, this is all bone, the temporal bone. Here's our hero bones, the malleus, incus, and stapes. And then in this cartoon, it shows this little tiny muscle called the stapedius muscle, and then another small muscle called the tensor tympani muscle. So the bones in the middle ear are suspended by ligaments and joints. They're bones, so you would have ligaments. I said and joints, but it's just ligaments. They're suspended by ligaments, and they're joined by synovial joints. So hopefully you remember what a synovial joint looks like. It's got synovial fluid in it. And they basically transmit or help transmit the vibratory motion of the eardrum. So this guy, let's see. So the vibratory motion of the eardrum here through the bones to the oval window, which isn't really, well, here's the stapes. So this must be the oval window in the front, but it's not showing it. But anyway, the tensor tympani and the stapedius muscles are connected to the bones, and if really loud sounds come into your ear and this tympanic membrane is vibrating really violently, these muscles can contract to help decrease the violent vibrations of the tympanic membrane. Okay. And it's just a cartoon that shows everything we just talked about. Yeah. And so the oval, it's cut, so it's kind of a weird cut, but the oval window would be in the front of the slide right here, and the stapes would be covering that oval window. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the labyrinth. Probably everybody's heard of the Minotaur and the labyrinth, or maybe you haven't. Anyway, it's mythology, and a labyrinth is just kind of a maze. So that's what this looked like to the first people that saw the inner ear. And so they called this a bony labyrinth. And the bone that the labyrinth is in is the temporal bone. So the bony labyrinth is just winding channels in the temporal bone. So that's in tan. So let's check it out. Everything in tan here. So this is all bony labyrinth. It's all bony labyrinth in here. Bony labyrinth. Everything in tan is part of the bone and part of the bony labyrinth. Obviously this yellow stuff is a nerve, right? There's 3 parts to the bony labyrinth. There's the semicircular canals. There's 3 of them, so semicircular canals. This is the anterior semicircular canal. This is the posterior semicircular canal, and then this is the lateral semicircular canal. And this guy's the cochlea. And then within the bony labyrinth, you have a membranous labyrinth, and that's the blue stuff. So everything that is in blue is a membranous labyrinth or a membranous tube that lives, this tube system lives within the bony labyrinth. And the tubes in blue are filled with fluid. Okay, so let's look at the parts of the bony labyrinth. So this kind of from here, this is the vestibule. So a vestibule is just an opening, like houses can have a vestibule. That's where you walk into the open space. So the vestibule of the bony labyrinth is here, and it's kind of a central cavity. It contains 2 membranous sacs, and here they are. 1, that's the utricle in the vestibule, and then actually, sorry, and then this is the saccule in the vestibule. And the saccule is continuous with the cochlear duct. So this piece right here is the cochlear duct that leads into the cochlea. The saccule is continuous with this duct. And then the utricle, so this space here, is continuous with these semicircular canals. So that utricle is continuous with these 3 semicircular canals. And the sacs in the vestibule, so the utricle and the saccule, house static equilibrium receptors. We'll do another video on equilibrium. But these static equilibrium receptors will respond to gravity and changes in the position of your head. But they're not receptors that will respond to rotational movement of your head. They respond to static equilibrium. Okay, so the 3 semicircular canals of the bony labyrinth. So remember, all this tan part is bone, so it's all temporal bone. It's a labyrinth. And within the bone, within the bony labyrinth, you have these blue pieces, so these membranous ducts. and they carry within them fluid. So we've got 3 semicircular canals oriented in different planes. So the semicircular ducts, so that would be the duct work of the bone, and then the canals would be in blue. So membranous semicircular ducts line each canal and contain fluid. And then there's an ampulla is just kind of an opening or a space. So this is the ampulla of the lateral semicircular canal. This is the ampulla of the anterior semicircular canal. And then this guy down here is the ampulla of the posterior semicircular canal. So, and then within each ampulla, you can see this little purple thing that looks like a dumbbell. That's your equilibrium receptor, and it's called the crista ampullaris. And these equilibrium receptors that look like little purple dumbbells in the ampulla of each canal contain receptors that respond to rotational movements of the head. So remember, these guys in the utricle and saccule, they'll respond to static equilibrium. These guys in the ampulla respond to rotational equilibrium. Okay, let's see if we've covered everything. So we talked about the semicircular ducts within the canals. We talked about the crista ampullaris in the ampulla of the semicircular canals, the utricle and saccule within these vestibules. Here's our stapes or stirrup covering the oval window. So the oval window would be right here. And then there's another structure here called a round window. We'll talk about that when we talk about transmitting sound. And then the cochlea, we haven't really talked about the cochlea yet, but this cochlea is the unit of hearing. So there's the tan stuff, that's the bone. The blue stuff, that's the duct within the bone. And so there's a cochlear duct. And then within the cochlea is this thing called a spiral organ of Corti. That's where you house the receptors for hearing. And then you have these spots called the maculae. So these purple spots within the utricle and saccule, they're called maculae. That's where the receptors for static equilibrium live. And then you have the facial nerve. Remember the cranial nerves, the facial nerve and the vestibular nerve. So the vestibular nerve, you can see it goes to the vestibule. So this whole area is the vestibule. And then the facial nerve is cut here. And the cochlear nerve, you can see, goes to the cochlea.